the judgment of the whore in chapter 17, then the fall of Babylon, chapter 18, and finally a section on riding the beast. So we're going to look at really things that are surely to happen in the future. So these things that we're going to consider tonight really haven't happened, but they will happen once Christ returns. So chapter 17 of Revelation continues the seventh vial, which began in chapter 16, verse 17, and it also gives us the final manifestation of the apostasy. And then chapter 18 describes the impact of the total obliteration of Rome and the destruction of that system. Okay, so we're going to turn now to chapter 17, and we're going to just read the first three verses, which they're on the screen of Revelation 17. So it says, "And there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So she carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So this chapter 17, is all about a woman who rides a scarlet beast, or we might say a red beast. And she's portrayed there, as we read, she's decked with jewels and offers a cup of drugged wine. So John is reminded here of a system which is described as a whore or a harlot, and it's really a follow-up of the description of chapter 12, verse 1. As we saw in previous classes, a false system of Christianity was going to arise, which developed from the ecclesia, and it's viewed by God as an adulteress. And at this stage, this woman or this religious system has lost the truth and become involved with politics, as those verses mention that she's involved with the kings of the earth, and rather than in trusting God. And as those verses, we also saw that she's got influence over many waters. And Revelation 17, verse 15 actually tells us what the waters represent. Because if I just read, if you've got your Bibles open in Revelation 17, verse 15, but I'll just read it out. It says, "He said unto me, The waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So it's about a system, a religious system, which has great influence over many nations and many people. Now, this slide, which I've got on the screen now, shows really the progress of the spiritual decline of the ecclesia. In 2 Corinthians 11, verse 2, Paul describes the ecclesia there as a chaste virgin, and Paul wanted to keep the ecclesia pure from any false doctrine or false teaching. But as we read further in the book of Revelation, for example, chapter 12, verse 1, something that we looked at a few months ago, there the ecclesia is portrayed as a pregnant, unfaithful woman. And then finally, in Revelation 17, verse 1, it's even worse. She's described as a whore or a harlot. So we can see in God's eyes, and remember, this is really the words of God or the words of Jesus Christ as he has given to John. And you can see that in God's eyes, he's looked at as the ecclesia has become more and more unfaithful and adulterated in God's eyes. Now, this woman that's riding a beast would have been familiar to John, because in Greek mythology, the goddess Europa had been captured and carried away on the back of a bull, which was really the god Zeus. This is all, again, based upon Greek beliefs. And the bull was known to Romans as their chief god, Jupiter. But it's interesting, again, that whilst John was using, or God was using ancient pagan systems, pagan symbols to portray this system of the future, we can see it actually used in modern times as well. So we've got on the screen there a magazine there on the left, which portrays a woman on a beast. That's a German magazine. In the middle, you've got a euro coin, and again, it's got a woman riding a beast. And also on the far right, it's got a Time magazine. Again, it shows a woman riding a beast. So we can see it today. Even the world uses this symbol as well, and it's used of Europe. Now, in verse 5, and in describing this symbol about this woman or this harlot, it says, upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So we see here a contrast with the true bride of Christ, because in the previous class, in the previous chapter of Revelation 14, verse 1, those that were God's true followers had the Father's name written on their forehead. So that's what they had written on their forehead, which is a representative of their thinking. But here, this system hasn't got the Father's name written on a forehead. It's got really Babylon the Great written on there, and it's described, and it also says that she's got the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. These are all written on her forehead. And so, as we said, this is really describing the apostate Christianity, which has adopted a lot of pagan idolatry and pagan ideas and fused them into true Christianity. Now, the mystery on the forehead reminds us of the rites and the ceremonies and the doctrines and the mysteries of which are found in ancient paganism in Babylon. And you might have heard of a book called The Two Babylons, written by a man called Alexander Hislop, and he goes and shows how a lot of the doctrines and ceremonies of the Roman Catholic Church were originally practiced by ancient Babylon. But also, you can see on the screen there a small excerpt from a book called Handbook for Today's Catholic. So this is a book like a first principles book, we might say, for the Catholic Church. And you can see some of the things that were written there on page 16. It talks about the mystery of the Trinity is the central doctrine of the Catholic faith. Upon it are based all other teachings of the Church. It's page 16. And then later on page 46, the same book says, in the Mass, both past and future become really present in mystery. So we can see here the word mystery used a lot here in this Catholic book. So it's quite appropriate that that's what's this Roman system, or this ecclesiastical system, has got mystery written on a forehead. And they call it a mystery because all these teachings, for example, the Trinity, all don't make any sense. So that's why they have to say it's a mystery, because you can't really understand it. And that applies to a lot of their doctrines. So the other interesting thing about this verse is that she's called the mother of harlots. So she's not the only one that's unfaithful, but she's got others that come from her. And so the Roman Catholic Church really has many daughters. These are the Orthodox Church and the Protestant churches of Christendom, and whose beliefs are mainly the same as those in Rome. So, for example, all these other Christian offshoots from the Catholic Church, whether it's Protestants or Orthodox, they all believe in the Trinity. They all believe in immortality of the soul and going to heaven when you die. They all believe in an evil supernatural devil, etc., etc. So they're not that much different from the Roman Catholic Church. That's why these other Christian systems can be called the daughters, and that the Roman Catholic Church is the mother of these other churches. And the other interesting thing it mentions in verse 6 of Revelation 17, it says, I saw the woman drunken with the blood of saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And so we see here that, again, this fits with the Roman Catholic Church system, because we know through history that they were renowned for persecuting and putting to death many that disagreed with her teaching. And that happened for hundreds of years. And so, again, this really identifies with the Roman Catholic system. Now, on the top of this slide, we've got a quote from Cardinal Ratzinger. Now, if you don't know who Cardinal Ratzinger is, he actually became Pope Benedict XVI, and he died, I think it's about a month or two ago. And this is what he said in 2002, before he became Pope. He said, "It must be always clear that the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Universal Church is not the sister, but the mother of all churches." So here we have a Catholic cardinal who became Pope, and he admits that the Roman Catholic Church is the mother of all churches, or mother of all the other Protestant churches and other sects of Christianity. And the other interesting thing about this slide is that we've got a painting of a woman with a child there in a building in the Vatican, and underneath that we've got described there Mater Ecclesiae, and that's really just a Latin inscription which means the Mother Church. So again, we see further proof of what we're saying, what Revelation 17 is describing about this system. Now, we've got further identification with the system, and this is in Revelation 17, verse 9. And the quote there, which we've got on the slide, says, "And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth." And you can see from this slide, which is taken from a geological guidebook to Rome, you can see it on the right. This book is called The 7 Hills of Rome. So they admit that it's got 7 hills or 7 mountains. And when you open up the book, it mentions where those hills are. And you can see that at the bottom centre of that screen, the 7 hills. I'm not going to read them out, but that's what they are. So again, this is a further identification of this religious system that's centred on Rome. Who else can it be but really the Roman Catholic system? Now, this verse here in Revelation 17:8, we're just going to read it out. It says, "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and yet shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and yet is." So this can be a bit confusing to think what is John saying? He's talking about this beast system that was and is not and yet is. So first of all, the angel explains to him that the origins of this scarlet beast, this red beast, he had just seen was the beast of the sea of the earlier vision of chapter 13. Okay, so this scarlet beast, which is to come in the near future, was originally the beast of the sea, and it's going to be really the beast of the sea revived. So this existed, it was previous. But he says it is not. So it was not in existence as the angel speaks to John. For John lived during the 6th imperial head system. He was still writing when the Roman Empire was intact and was ruled by emperors. But finally, the Scarlet Beast is to arise from the people of Europe, and its final end would be destruction. It is the last phase of the Roman Empire. So all peoples will be astonished, except true believers, when they behold the beast that yet is or shall be present. That is, it shall be revealed. So that's what that is talking about. So it's something which is going to be revealed shortly. And the influence also of the Roman Catholic Church is a very important element in this beast system. So again, we've got a slide here which perhaps tries to explain what we've been talking about. Now, David mentioned even in the last class about Daniel's 10 horned fourth beast. So that's from Daniel chapter 7. And as David said, this fourth beast described in Daniel 7 has to exist right to the time of Christ's return. And the book of Revelation actually tells us different phases of this 10-horned fourth beast. And they're listed there down the bottom of the slide. So it started off, for example, in Revelation 12, verse 3, where it talked about the 10-horned dragon. Then eventually the power was transferred to the 10-horned beast in Revelation 13, verse 1, which is the beast of the sea. Then that power was passed on to the 10-horned beast, Revelation 13, verse 11. That's also known as the beast of the earth. And then that beast system was plunged into darkness. That's in Revelation 16, verse 10. So when we have the vile period, especially under Napoleon, then he brought really the Holy Roman Empire system to an end. So all the beast system ended. But what's going to happen with the Scarlet Beast, which is described in Revelation 17, is that this 10-horned beast is actually going to ascend. It's going to reform by a union of 10 horn systems, 10 horn kingdoms. So that's going to be re-established at the time of Christ, although it's being formed in a sense now, which we'll look at, but it's not going to really get its complete power until Christ returns. And eventually that system, that's this Scarlet Beast system and a woman, are all going to be destroyed by Christ and the saints. Okay, we move on then, talking about this system that it goes on that they're going to make war with the Lamb. Now, the Lamb is, of course, the Lord Jesus Christ. So we'll just read verses 12 to 14, and they're on the screen. It says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them." Okay, so the history of Europe over the century shows on average there's the figure of 10. There were roughly around 10 nation states of Europe. And these nation states here, as described in these verses, are eventually going to give up their power unto the beast. And they do that because they want to make war against the Lamb, or holy war. And if you note these verses, it actually shows you who takes the initiative. It's actually the beast system and the 10 horns that make war with the Lamb. You know, it's not the Lamb making war with them. They are the ones that take the initiative and fight against Christ and the saints. Now, this war with the Lamb is the second stage because, as we have considered earlier in chapter 14, the Battle of Armageddon has already been fought at Jerusalem and Gog's forces has overcome. So you've got to remember that once we're talking about this, it's going to talk about a battle or a series of battles which are going to occur after Gog has been destroyed at Armageddon. And if you might notice in Revelation 17 that it makes no mention of the dragon, because the dragon power represents Russia, and that's been taken out of the way, although it's going to make a resurrection, as we'll see in a couple of classes' time. But at this stage, it doesn't mention the dragon. The dragon's out of the way, and what's left is the beast system that's going to fight it against Christ and the saints. And as it says at the bottom of the slide, many people have tried to unite Europe since the Holy Roman Empire. For example, you might even think about Adolf Hitler. But history shows that the iron and the clay do not cleave together and always break apart. But at the last, this is not achieved by force, but the states choose to give their power to the beast. Now, we can see really this starting to form now with the European Union. And we can see it really starting to form, but they haven't yet given their power to the Pope. It's interesting, we've got this photo here, which is taken with the Pope and the leaders of Europe a few years ago. And you can see from the photo, you think, oh, who's the boss here? It's obviously the man in white right in the centre. But at the moment, the Pope hasn't got a lot of power yet over the European Union, but he will have after Christ's return. And the question is, what will cause all these nations of Europe to give their power to the Pope or the papacy in the future? Well, perhaps one reason could be, and we probably think this would be the reason, is that once Christ comes back on the earth and he defeats Russia, that the Pope and other Christian systems are going to teach that the Antichrist will proclaim himself as King of the Jews. He's going to also rebuild the temple, and he will ask all nations to submit to him. So it's easy to see how the papacy and other Christian systems will say that Christ, when he returns, is actually the Antichrist, and they have to fight against him. And this is probably the main reason why once they see Christ use his power to destroy Russia, that they will say, well, he's obviously got supernatural powers. He must be the Antichrist, and we have to unite to fight against them. And then all of Europe, all the European nations will give their power unto the papacy, unto the Scarlet Woman, we might say. And why do they believe this? Because they believe now the teaching of the false teaching of the Antichrist system, which the Roman Catholic Church started many hundreds of years ago, and now is believed by a lot of the Christian systems today. They believe in the Antichrist theory, which was originally promulgated by the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, we'll now look at chapter 18, which deals with the fall of Babylon. So the vision of chapter 17 showed Babylon the Great as a whore at the height of its power, dominating the beast. But it's also interesting to note the following further evidence of the true identity of Babylon. So we've got there a few quotes on the screen here show how other people have called the Roman Empire, or Rome itself, Babylon. So the historian Gibbon, in The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, said the epithet of Babylon was applied to the city and to the Empire of Rome. Also, Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo, who lived around 354 AD, said Babylon was the first Rome. Rome plays the role of a second Babylon. So it's interesting that Augustine, who was actually a Christian bishop, actually himself called Rome Babylon. And finally, there's a quote there from Hippolytus, the Bishop of Portus. He said, Babylon sent thee, the Apostle John, into banishment. Now, we know that, of course, it was the Roman Empire that did that, but he calls it Babylon. So it was quite well known that Babylon was another name for Rome. Now, in Revelation 18, verse 4, gives actually a warning to those to come out of that Catholic system, because chapter 18 of Revelation deals with the destruction of Rome and the destruction of that system. So in Revelation 18, verse 4, it says, And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So once Christ does return and defeats Russia in the Battle of Armageddon, there's going to be the gospel preached to people. The people of the world are going to have an opportunity to submit to Christ, even the Catholic people. So they're really being implored by God and by Christ to come out of that system so that you be not partakers of her sins. Otherwise, you'll receive of her plagues and you'll be destroyed with her. So God, again, in his mercy, is offering an opportunity for those people in the Catholic system to leave it and to be joined and to submit to Christ and the saints. Now, a lot of the language that we've been reading in Revelation 17 and 18 actually comes from previous prophets. For example, we've got here on the screen a quote from the prophet Jeremiah 51, verse 6 and 7. And as we read this quote, have a look at how the language here is very similar to what we find in Revelation 17 and 18. And he says, "Flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, hath made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad." So we can see here very similar language, even the language there about fleeing out of Babylon, which we just read in Revelation 18, that God was using this to literal Babylon, ancient Babylon in Jeremiah's time. And again, we see that same language that we just saw in that previous slide here used of modern Babylon. So we'll just read Revelation 18, verse 2 and 3, which says, "And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." So here we have again God proclaimed the destruction of Babylon because all the nations have been drunk with the wine of her doctrine, and similar things were said, as we saw in Jeremiah, that also the ancient Babylon did the same thing. So Rome will be destroyed. Now, in Revelation 18, verse 7, it also says there about this system, about ancient Babylon and the religious system. "For she said in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow." So today, Rome and the Roman Catholic Church has revived in its power and prestige among the nations. And she's recovered from her widowhood of the 19th century, when she lost a lot of her temporal power. And today she sees herself in charge of the kings of the earth, and she will, as we saw, get even more power in Revelation 17 when she rides the beast. But what's going to happen is that the overthrow of Babylon the Great will become suddenly and without warning, and like Babylon of old, which we saw in Jeremiah 51, verse 64, it will be violent and complete. And probably, as verse 9 of Revelation 18 says, it could be through a volcanic eruption and an earthquake, which might be involved in literally destroying the city of Rome completely. Now, Revelation 18 also goes on in many verses. We're only going to look at a few of them, talking about the great merchandise and the merchants of the system of Babylon the Great. And we've just got there a couple of verses describing this. So it talks about there, the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, that is the destruction of Rome and the Roman system, for no one buys their merchandise anymore, merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and cinnamon and incense, and fragrant oil, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and the bodies and souls of men. So once Rome has been destroyed, there's going to be a lament because of the merchandise and the riches of this system of Babylon. As you can see, that not only does the Roman Catholic Church, not is it a wealthy system, but it trades in all sorts of things, but especially it trades in the bodies and souls of men. And today, the Roman Catholic Church makes a lot of money through things like paying for masses for the souls of the dead, In the past, and also you paid for indulgences for sins, so your sins could be forgiven, and you pay for funerals, you pay for weddings, etc., etc. They make a lot of money through their religion, and especially because they believe in the immortality of the soul. That's why they get a lot of money by saying, if your loved ones have died, you've got to say masses for their soul so they can get out of purgatory and go to heaven. And they obviously expect money for that. So that's where they make a lot of their money, through their spiritual deception. And again, in the next few verses, Revelation 18 talks about the wealth of this system. And we'll just read what it's got on the screen. It says that the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company in ships and all the sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off. So we know that this system, the Roman Catholic Church, is quite wealthy. They have many churches and property all over the place, and they've made themselves, as I said, quite wealthy. They also, apparently, one writer says that the Roman Catholic Church actually owns about 1/3 of Rome's real estate, and the Roman Catholic Church is probably the largest owner of stocks and bonds in the world, and they own various industries from electronics and plastics to airlines and chemical and engineering firms. And the big bonus is, of course, that the Vatican, or the Roman Catholic Church, often doesn't pay any tax. So it's all tax-free, and that's why they can make a lot of money through all these things. But eventually, this system, as we said, is going to be destroyed. And God gives us the final verdict there in the last few verses of Revelation 18. And it says, Therefore all thy sorceries were all the nations deceived, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. So this is the reason why the Catholic Church, this system, or one of the reasons it's going to be destroyed, because of their sorceries, because of their false doctrine that deceive the nations, and also because it's a very bloodthirsty system which has put to death many prophets and saints. Many brothers and sisters of previous ages were killed by this system. But what's going to happen at Christ's return is that whilst Rome is destroyed and Rome is going to be seen no more, Zion is going to rise, or Jerusalem. So in Isaiah 54 verse 8, it says, In a little wrath I hid my face from thee, that is from Israel, but with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee, says the Lord thy Redeemer. So we know that when Christ does come back and he destroys this system, it's going to be replaced. The city of Rome and its influence is going to be replaced by the city of Jerusalem. And we know that a temple is going to be built there, and that's where the law of God is going to go forth. And all the nations of the earth and all the peoples of the earth are going to be taught the truth of the gospel. Okay. All right, we go now to our final section, which is called Riding the Beast. So it's interesting that we have portrayed in Revelation 17 a woman riding a beast. Now, when you think about that, why does it have it that way? Well, if you think about it, when you're riding a beast, you're in control of it. If you think about, for example, when we see if you see a cowboy or somebody riding a horse, why is he riding a horse? And once he's on the horse and riding it, he can actually make the animal go wherever he wants. He's in control of that animal. He can make it go faster or slower, turn right or left, etc. And so that's why we've got this woman, this religious system, riding this beast, because she is going to control Catholic Europe for a short time against fighting Christ. Actually, one thing I think I forgot to mention in the previous slide, you might remember that I mentioned that it says that the 10 horns were going to give unto the beast a power for 1 hour with the beast. And if we take that for a 1 hour as a day for a year principle of 30 years, that's what we believe it's going to be, how long the war is going to happen against Christ. It's going to be a 30-year period where this Catholic system is going to fight against Christ and the saints. So it's not over in a moment. It's going to be a war which takes a long time to be victorious in. Okay, sorry for that little side comment. Okay, now let's look at riding the beast, what this represents. So we saw that in Revelation 17, verse 3, a woman sit upon a scarlet-covered beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So really, this is, as we said, it's talking about a woman, this religious system having control over the nations. And the interesting thing about the Catholic system is that they've always tried to control or direct political events. If we can see that slide there, a picture of the Pope with Putin, again, getting involved with the kings of the earth, hoping to gain influence over the nations. And she's always done that. It's not something that's very strange to her. The Catholic system has done this for many hundreds and hundreds of years. She's got involved in politics and tried to control events. So one example here, we've got an influence here in the previous century. This is during the time of Mussolini in the early 1900s. And this is where Pope Pius XI signed a concordat with Benito Mussolini, who was the leader of Italy at that time. A concordat means like a treaty. And so what happened when they signed this with Mussolini was that Mussolini gave back to the power a small amount of territory. This is, so she actually got back some temporal power, not a lot, but the Vatican City, where it is today, I think it's about 200 acres of land. And so the Vatican is really another country in the middle of Italy. It's only a small amount of land, but they are an independent country. And this shows again how the papacy came back to power after losing all the temporal power in 1870. About 60 years later, she got back some of that power again through Mussolini. And Mussolini also gave back to her many millions of dollars in compensation. And even worse than that was that a few years later, in 1933, we see again the Catholic Church getting involved with Nazi Germany and forming also another concordat with Nazi Germany. And this was signed by a Cardinal Pacelli, as you can see here in the middle of the picture. And he would become eventually Pope Pius XII. He was a pope during the Second World War. And we've got there a quote from the bottom by a man called von Papen, and he was the Vice-Chancellor, or the Deputy of Germany at that time. The Chancellor was Adolf Hitler. And he said, the Third Reich is the first power in the world not only to recognise, but also to put into practice the high principles of the papacy. And so here we see that the Third Reich was trying to get on side with the Catholic Church. It wanted to work with the Catholic Church in implementing its own policies. So how did Adolf Hitler see the Catholic Church? Well, he saw himself really in carrying on the work of the Catholic Church. And he said, in the quote we've got on the screen there, as for the Jews, I am just carrying on with the same policy which the Catholic Church has adopted for 1,500 years, when it has regarded the Jews as dangerous and pushed them into ghettos, etc., because it knew what the Jews were like. I don't put race above religion, but I do see the danger in the representatives of this race for Christianity and state. And perhaps I am doing Christianity a great service. So here we have Adolf Hitler really saying, when he started to persecute the Jews, when he started putting them into ghettos, that he was just carrying on the same policy that the Catholic Church did. And that's true. So the Catholic Church, apart from also, we mentioned about persecuting the saints, they also persecuted and killed the Jews as well. And we know, of course, the Jews are God's people too. And so we can see here that the Catholic Church is very anti-Jewish, and the Roman Catholic Church, we can see why they got friends with Adolf Hitler, because Adolf Hitler really carried on with what the Catholic Church was doing. And so the Catholic Church was very friendly with the Nazis and with the fascists during World War II. But when they lost World War II, the Catholic Church, again, changed tack. So once again, the Catholic Church is very clever, because if they see one power losing, they'll try to latch on to the winning power. For example, in 1949, Pope Pius XII issued a decree prescribing a penalty of excommunication for those who voluntarily adopted communism. So Pope Pius, in the early years after World War II, the Italian Communist Party became quite big in Italy, and Pope Pius XII said, if you vote for the Communist Party, you'll be disfellowshipped in a way. That's what he was saying. So he really hated communism. But as time went on, it seemed like during the Cold War that communism was getting more and more powerful in Russia and in other places. And so by the time of the next Pope, Pope John the 23rd, he was actually quite more friendly towards communism. So you can see here again the Catholic Church seeing that communism was getting more powerful, they switched sides. So, as it says there, pressure from the First and Second World Wars obliged the Church to clarify its teachings and to work out a strategy for survival. And so they wanted to survive, they wanted to be on the winning side, and so they switched to following after communism. But also during that time, they started proceeding to follow the philosophies which brought down, which came from the French Revolution. I think David looked at this a bit in his last class. So now the Catholic Church is all focused on humanism, on socialism, and human rights, which are the frog-like spirits. It sees whichever philosophy is popular in the world today and tries to latch on to those things because it wants to be on the winning side. So we've got this slide here entitled "The Papacy Speaking Like a Frog." And so, as we said, the papacy has now absorbed the philosophies of the French Revolution. It champions human rights throughout the world, and it also champions Christian socialism. And I've got there a quote down the bottom in blue, which was from a member of the Labor Party in 1973, and she said, "We will be joined to a Europe in which the Catholic religion will be the dominant faith, and which the application of the Catholic social doctrine will be a major factor in everyday political and economic life." So again, she saw the future would be a Catholic Europe with Catholic social doctrines. So what has happened then over the years? Well, during the Reformation, which happened about 500 years ago, we know that a lot of various Christian groups broke away from the Catholic Church because they all said, including the Anglican Church, well, the Catholic Church is the Antichrist. But in recent years, we see many more Christian groups becoming friendlier and friendlier with the Pope. And this article, which we have there on the screen, is actually quite recent. It's taken from the 5th of August last year from the Catholic News Agency. And the heading there is "Anglicans recognise the Pope as the father of a church in the West," says the Archbishop of Canterbury. So we can see a great change here with the head of the Anglican Church in England, who's the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's now calling the Pope. He's not calling him the Antichrist. He says he's the father of the church in the West. So we can see here how friendly they are to the Pope and the great influence that the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church has increased in the last few years. So what's happened is really what's described in this slide. This is taken from a book called Selling Out to the Pope. This is from 1996. And the heading there is Doctrine No Longer Important. And this man says, doctrine is no longer of prime importance to many evangelicals. Emphasis has shifted in recent years to shared experience as a common ground for fellowship rather than common doctrinal convictions. Everybody that loves Jesus should get together without regard to doctrinal distinctions. Evangelicalism as a whole has been stricken with a bad case of the warm fuzzies. If a Roman Catholic loves Jesus, then I should embrace him as a brother in Christ. This is the common view of many. Yeah, so this man, as I said, this man really describes what's happened over the last few years amongst the Protestant religions, that they all see the Pope as a great Christian, and we can love him because the Roman Catholics also love Jesus. And really, doctrine is no longer important. So we'll conclude here with the words of actually a British Prime Minister. In the end of the 19th century, there was a Prime Minister called Gladstone. And he even saw the danger of the Catholic system. And he said this in the top of this slide. He says, I warn my countrymen against the velvet paw and the smooth and soft exterior of a system which is dangerous to the foundations of civil order. So that's what a Prime Minister said, a British Prime Minister said about the Catholic system. And as we've seen really tonight, we've seen that the Roman Catholic Church is the harlot system. She's going to ride the European beast, and they are going to make war with Christ and the saints, and eventually they're going to be destroyed by Christ and the saints. So that's why it's very important that when we look at these chapters, they are really a warning for us to make sure that we do have a strong faith, that our doctrine is strong and it is correct. Because if we are lulled into a false sense of security through all these other Christian groups and say, oh, the Catholic Church is okay, then people will end up believing the Catholic Church and eventually fighting against Christ and the saints when he returns to this earth. So the challenge is for us to keep our doctrine pure and for us to choose our allegiance and to strengthen our faith daily, because we need to know our enemy, and the enemy is really the Catholic system and all the various other religious systems which have corrupted God's true doctrine.